Welcome and thank you for joining us for the first in our exciting series of HPE Evolve's live stream panel discussion events. My name is Des Blanchfield. I'm the founder and CEO and chief data scientist for the digital and social media publishing house known as Social. I have the honor today and the privilege of being your host and moderator for this series. And we have an absolute hour of power planned for you today. We're kicking off with a brief market update on key trends in the world of hybrid cloud adoption by Harris Schneiderman. Harris is Enterprise Sales Director for the Hybrid Cloud practice at HPE. Our market update from Harris will be followed by what I like to call our main stage, our expert panel discussion, which today will be focused on the topic of VMware Cloud on Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And in particular, we'll be discussing patterns for success with hybrid cloud for business, technology, and operational perspectives. And finally, we'll wrap up with a brief Q&A section where you'll get to tap into the combined experience and brain power of today's amazing panel. I should note that you can also post questions at any time through this hour with the chat feature. We'll do our best to incorporate some of your questions in the panel section where we can. Otherwise, we'll cover as many as possible at the end, time permitting. And any we don't get to, we'll follow up at the end of this event via email and so forth. We would also like to invite you to join the conversation online. So if you are tracking on Twitter, the hashtag HPE Evolve, if you search for the hash HPE Evolve hashtag and click latest, you'll be able to follow it. Post any questions you have there as well. Our team is tracking that online. And again, they'll incorporate those in the questions that are put to us. We'll do our best to get to it. Before I introduce today's panel of experts, though, let me briefly set the scene with three very pertinent key points from a report recently published by the World Economic Forum. It was titled How Businesses Can Realize the Benefits of the Cloud. It was published April 16th this year in 2021. And what they found was that more than 90% of businesses are leveraging cloud technologies and have actually started migrating applications to leverage the scalability, security, and efficiency that cloud provides. And yet, the supporting research to this report found that most organizations have not yet established cloud-native capabilities or achieved business impact at scale. And they stated three key points that I'm going to share with you now. Firstly, they found that businesses are increasingly leveraging cloud technologies to increase scalability, security, and efficiency. Though they found that progress had been lacking as far as achieving impact at scale. And most importantly, in my view, particularly in the context of today's conversation, they found that cloud transformation requires deep expertise and operating model change. And those two things, I think, are going to be what we talk about in detail today. This is actually a consistent theme I've seen worldwide over the years, and more so of late, particularly during the 2020 experience. And that what we're finding more often than not is the initial focus on reduction in technology and operations spend by leveraging the cloud, which businesses find attractive, is often offset by the challenge they have of finding skills internally who have the capabilities and experience to do that for them. But what we're finding is that overall, if truly adopted as an operating model, the early focus on spend on technology and operations often proved to be a fraction of the full value able to be realized by organizations using cloud models to accelerate innovation, to reduce time to market, reduce time to return on investment, and to build completely new business models. Now, before I ask Harris to kick us off with his mini keynote styled market update, allow me to introduce you to our expert panel with whom I'll be discussing VMware Cloud on AWS and delving into the topic of patterns for success with hybrid cloud for your business. Today, I'm joined by an amazing panel, including from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Harris Schneiderman. Harris, thanks for joining us. Great to have you here.
Good morning, Des. Thanks for having me.
We're also joined by Mike Draper from HPE. Mike, great to have you here.
Thank you, Des. It's always a pleasure to participate in one of your panels.
Thank you so much. We are joined by Denise Plessis. Denise, great to have you here. Thanks for making time to join us.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
And we're also joined by David Lim from AWS. David, great to have you. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Des. Yeah, really looking forward to the session.
Fantastic. Now, folks, we will delve into each of these experts' backgrounds and the roles and titles when we get to the panel section and reintroduce them. But let's kick off with Harris. I wonder, before we bring our panelists in for a fireside chat, could I ask you to give us a brief market update around today's topic of VMware Cloud on AWS, and any insights that you could share into some of the latest market trends you're seeing around the broad topic we're going to discuss, which is patterns for success with hybrid cloud, just to set the scene for today's panel discussion.
Absolutely, Des. No, thanks for the opportunity. So, just looking back in the past year, we've had a very eventful year and some dramatic changes in the industry because of COVID. So I think it's a good opportunity to look back and see, what changes it's brought into the industry and specifically how that's had an impact on our customers and their propensity to adopt cloud and the approaches that they've been taking. So just for some interesting data points, if we look back to the first quarter in which COVID became an actual pandemic, not surprisingly, we saw a decline in overall spending by IT by 8%. However, we saw a dramatic increase in cloud spending by over 37%. And that's an indication, and that really confirms what we've seen with our customers as well, which is that companies really accelerated their adoption of cloud as a result of COVID and as a consequence of having to work remotely. But we can look beyond just the overall spend as well. It's not just what they spend, but also how. In the latest PwC survey, 75% of decision makers indicated that they were moving towards an OpEx cost model as opposed to CapEx. And that's, again, really important because that's where the majority of cloud spend would fall. So both of those indicators suggest, that cloud is becoming an increasingly more important trend. And then, you can also dig in a little bit more and look not just at, cloud itself, but what workloads. And we're seeing increased adoption of some of what we call the more modern workloads. So Kubernetes, platform as a service, serverless. These are becoming very popular, in particular with customers, large enterprises that are embracing multi-cloud and want the ability to have some portability and the ability to use the right cloud for the right workload. In addition to that, a lot of organizations have said that they are accelerating their digital transformation plans as a result of COVID. And many organizations have said that adoption and migration to public cloud has now become an imperative for them to survive. So that's obviously some very positive developments in that space. But at the same time, there have been some interesting dynamics from that. So for example, because people are now working from home, we're seeing a dramatic increase, over 400% increase in endpoint attacks, because hackers know that people are now working at home behind a home router, not necessarily in a corporate environment. And so the areas of vulnerability have shifted, and organizations are having to adapt to that, which is very important. We're also seeing shifts in consumer behavior as well, which I think is important to recognize, right? 2019 was all about the sharing economy and Uber and things like that. And with the concerns of COVID, the enthusiasm for sharing has gone down because of infection concerns, and that's been really eclipsed by what we call the isolation economy. And we've seen a dramatic uptick in video conferencing platforms and other technologies that enable people to work and live more comfortably at home. And so, obviously that demand is driving increased uptake of cloud services. And what we're seeing from organizations is this is not just a temporary shift where we think, companies are going to move workloads to the cloud and then, as soon as COVID's over, they're going to move back. We feel that the majority of these workloads are going to remain because as long as the deployment's been successful. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think the other important piece is it's not just a shift in technology, but it's also the shift in work style. For a lot of organizations, this working from home was a grand experiment created by necessity. And a lot of organizations have found that, fortunately, their business processes can work at home. And so, again, we're not expecting that things are going to go back to normal. Both the technology is changing and the way that people are working is changing. And we think that that's going to be largely a persistent change. So anyway, I hope that's a helpful overview, Des. If you like, I can talk about a specific customer example, maybe that's gone through this transformation in the last year, if that would be of interest.
Actually, yeah, one of the things I was keen to get a sense on is kind of the journey, I guess, that you're seeing a lot of organizations taking, and if there are any commonalities around that. One of the things that I'm seeing in the market at the moment is that, as I mentioned earlier on, a lot of organizations are looking to glean the benefits of a transition to cloud. But what they're finding is that, cloud technology or cloud transitions, as it were, is not their core business. And invariably, they're finding that they may or may not have the appropriate skills, or even if people inside their organization are familiar with cloud, they might not have the right training or certification, What are you seeing in the space as far as the market trends go with regard to the level of skills or capability and readiness that people have when they do realize that they want to make some form of transition to cloud, and particularly leveraging the likes of VMware Cloud and AWS? Are they coming to partners like yourselves? Are they going out to the market? What are you seeing out there as far as the average journey in this space, trying to get to the cloud, if you like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's a number of reasons why companies are looking for help. I think you cited a really strong driving point, which is the availability of skills, but also it's a question of capacity too in a lot of cases. None of these organizations were really planning on doing rapid large transformation projects before COVID came on the scene, and they had to quickly scale up to do so. And in some cases, hiring people full time to do that kind of transformation doesn't really make sense.
Right.
And an industry where not surprisingly we're seeing a lot of demand was the healthcare industry, right? For a variety of reasons. And we have a customer that we worked with all through last year and even prior to COVID around that transformation. And it consisted of a number of things. One was, of course, training and upskilling their team and providing knowledge transfer to get them to a stage where they could be self-sufficient. And I think that's really important because the cloud transformation project doesn't just end after you do the migration and then you walk away and everything's done. It's an ongoing program. And so, we feel strongly that for that program to succeed, we need to transition the skills successfully to the team so that they can maintain those patterns and practices once the formal project ends.
Right.
So I think that's critically important. And then the second thing is to institute a governing body within that organization to enable good decision making where all stakeholders are included and decisions are made holistically as opposed to just isolated technology decisions made by IT. That's one of the key structures that needs to succeed for a company long term in order for them to become self-sufficient.
Perfect. Well, we're definitely going to delve into that. Well, allow me to bring each of you back in here. And what I'm going to do is ask you to just take a minute as I reintroduce you to maybe just give us a quick background on yourselves and particularly what your roles and remits are, just so that our audience has a bit more sense of kind of who's here today. Mike Draper, I wonder if I could start with you. I wonder if you could just briefly introduce yourself in your role as Enterprise Sales Director for the Hybrid Cloud practice there at HPE.
Thanks, Des. Yes, I'm the Director of Advisory and Services for HPE's Hybrid Cloud practice. What does that mean? That means I spend most of my time working with clients and delivery teams to define and implement hybrid cloud programs that achieve specific business outcomes. And that's the key differentiator of our practice. We start with the end in mind.
Fantastic. Denise, I wonder if I could bring you in here in your role heading up the multi-cloud business space at VMware, working with partners and services across ANZ. I wonder if you could take a minute to introduce yourself and give us a little insight into what your role entails.
Yeah, well, good morning. Denise Plessis. My role at VMware is really to work with our best-in-class partners to help them build a practice and capability around VMware Cloud on AWS. So I'm really looking forward to the session.
Fantastic. It's great to have you. David Lim, I wonder if I could turn to you next in your role heading up the cloud for AWS and worldwide public sector there at VMware. VMware Cloud, that is, rather, at Amazon Web Services. Could you maybe just give us a brief intro to yourself and your role and a bit of the ins and outs of what that role entails?
Yeah, thanks, Des. Look, I've been at AWS now coming up to 6 years, and the service went generally available to our customers about 4 years ago. So I manage our VMware Cloud and AWS business for AsiaPac and Japan, and really start to help our customers and through our partners migrate and accelerate their workloads to the cloud. So that's been an exciting journey and one that's still continuing.
Indeed, and we're going to delve into that knowledge and experience very soon. Harris, I wonder if I could just wrap up with yourself and circle back in your role, Enterprise Sales Director for Hybrid Cloud practice at HPE. Could you maybe just take a minute to reintroduce yourself and I guess give us a little insight into kind of what that role entails?
Absolutely, Des. So, I work with Mike Draper. We're on the same team. I'm part of the HPE Pointnext organization, so we focus on professional services. But unlike my colleagues in Pointnext that focus more on HPE's traditional business around implementing hardware, I focus on cloud transformation, helping customers come up with a hybrid cloud strategy, and then making sure that they're able to execute that strategy, whether that be across public cloud platform like AWS, or their on-premises environment VMware, and making them work seamlessly together in a hybrid way.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for making time to be part of this great panel, and we're really, really excited to delve into this. So let's kick off with our first topic for the day. This one's really focused around the business problem. When customers with VMware on-premises transitioning to a hypervisor, in this case, AWS, for example, is an option for hybrid cloud. Often it's referred to as a journey from that on-premises to cloud, and it often ends up being, in my experience anyway, a sense of a hybrid solution, because it's not either one or the other. It's not all on-premises, not all in the cloud. Sometimes some of it's hosted in third-party data centers. When we think about that challenge of sort of the business challenge around VMware Cloud and AWS, and looking for some of those patterns for success with hybrid cloud, Mike, I wonder if I could bring you in here to start off with. From a strategy point of view, what are some of the key factors that organizations should look to as they attempt to realize faster value in their challenge to leverage hybrid cloud solutions?
Well, Des, what are the key factors that impact organizations realizing value? It is a great question. And understanding the outcomes you wish to achieve and the associated challenges is paramount to minimize disruption and optimizing time to value. Now, every program manager is going to tell you, their game plan is to capture value and avoid pitfalls, but it's easier said than done. Now, the challenge here is realizing, value faster is about understanding the complexity and the transformative nature of hybrid cloud adoption programs, and then making the right choice. I mean, these programs are complex. What do you mean by complexity? By classic definition of complexity is the number of moving parts in a unique system or process. So when you think about the various stakeholders that hybrid cloud impacts, you can go down the list: governance, risk and compliance, finance, vendor management, platform engineering, security, app dev teams, infrastructure and operation, and the list goes on. Now, these programs are transformative in nature, and that you have to redefine and optimize process flows to obtain values. That really isn't the core competency of the enterprise. If you think about it, if you take something, you pick it up and you move it and you put it down and you don't change anything, right? Where's the value coming from if you don't introduce new capabilities? Now, where we have seen some clients get into trouble is when they do a massive or accelerated lift and shift to the cloud, but they don't prepare for day two operations. And we call this winning the battle and losing the war, right? You move, nothing changes, you accrue more technical debt. That's something we all want to stay away from. However, on the flip side, we've seen some clients who've been wildly successful, right? They have broad stakeholder support. They build a TCO, an economic model, whether it be a TCO or an ROI, and they use that model to govern the program and make decisions. They have a robust plan with key success criteria, business criteria that they want to achieve. Keep in mind, right, the purpose of any technology is to deliver business value. Too often we perseverate on the technology, tick all the technology boxes, but miss the business part. And they also deploy hybrid cloud programs in increments, each release, right, being focused on a specific value. Those are the patterns that we say for success. So I guess within the context of today's discussion about VMware on the cloud, if you're asking me, what are the key factors for realizing value faster that organizations should plan for when implementing VMC, I would say one, understand the areas of your systems and operations that will need to be transformed. Security, network, disaster recovery, backup are going to be at the top of the list, and a bunch more. Secure the services of someone who's been there and done that, right? They're going to help you navigate the pitfalls and position your project for success, right? Factor in time and budget for retooling and retraining. And the initial release, the initial phase should be focused squarely on getting VMware optimized and up and running Subsequent phases can be focused on bringing in all the cool services of AWS and extending your reach, things like RDS, Lambda, Redshift, Glacier, and so on. But you want to take that initial release, you want to learn and iterate, and then don't forget to celebrate your successes. So that would be my guidance.
That's great tips. It's one of those things where crawl before you walk, walk before you run, run before you sprint, and iterate. I'm a big fan of get version 1 working good at solid. Done beats perfect sometimes, and then iterate on that over time, and as you said, celebrate your successes, but also make your successes available so that you can realize some business benefit or some sort of value to your customers for that. Denise, as part of your work, I wonder if I can bring you in here. As part of your work with supporting customers in their efforts to transition to cloud, you get to see a broad range of approaches, I'm sure, to this whole business challenge. I wonder if you could share some of the key success factors that you're seeing drive good outcomes in multi-cloud solutions.
Yeah, look, I'm going to build on what Michael just said. But for me, the transition from local service to the cloud is really a multi-step process that requires a thorough preparation. Cloud migration steps are often the same, with the core processes depends on the company's side, infrastructure, and cloud migration reasons. Migrating to the cloud really requires a really deep, clear understanding of applications used in the company. I would personally recommend start by auditing your digital assets to identify the scope in the very first instance. Make a list of what software is currently in use. Identify what apps are no longer bringing any value to the business, and figure out what apps can bring more value if you did take them to the cloud. I think for me, agility is one of the main drivers that companies are either using private, hybrid, or public cloud adoption. And one of the cool super things about VMware Cloud, it allows companies to extend the existing on-premise vSphere environments to a VMware SDDC running in AWS. And fundamentally, VMware Cloud customers receive the architecture, capabilities, and operational experience that they're already really familiar with across their private and public cloud environments, which can improve productivity and reduce costs. So that would be my recommendation in essence.
Indeed, one of the things that really jumped out at me there with what you were talking about was just that, I guess, that seamless integration from on-premises to your experience in data center environments and then extending out to public cloud. Often there is a little bit of a culture shock of trying to get used to different environments, but if you can get that VMware Cloud environment across all of those, then operationally your life is going to be so much easier. David, your role, I'm sure, gives you a very unique lens through which you're seeing what's driving success with VMware Cloud and AWS. I wonder if you could share some of those insights regarding what the success factors in cloud initiatives have been in your experience.
Yeah, thanks, Des. And everyone's touched on a few points here. But VMware Cloud and AWS, prior to it becoming available 4 years ago, customers really had a choice, a single choice, and that was, stay on premise or the choice of moving to the cloud. And so what VMware Cloud, and I'll refer to it as VMC, that's what we affectionately call it, VMC now gives customers an additional choice or a conversation to have within the business. It's the only jointly engineered software-defined data center in the cloud that's between AWS and VMware. And AWS is the preferred cloud for all VMware vSphere workloads. I guess one of the key points here for the business is that it results in much faster or accelerated migrations of workloads to the cloud. And when customers are faced with renewing a data center or a hardware refresh, these are lengthy discussions, include huge business cases. We can help customers evacuate data centers in days and weeks as opposed to months and years through VMware Cloud on AWS. And we saw this through COVID, where customers needed capacity. Being able to spin up a software-defined data center in 2 hours makes a huge difference to business decisions. Because we've integrated and engineered together our AWS Direct Connect and VMware's vMotion to create Hybrid Cloud Connect. So you can stretch layer 2 IP addresses. You can start to leverage your existing infrastructure. And then, Des, you spoke earlier about leveraging skills and investment in the technology. I think one of the things that customers underestimate is the impact on skills. Going from a day two operations into a DevOps mode. And what VMware Cloud does is allows customers to leverage that same skill set and to use and coexist with the same technology that they've been using for up to 20 years or plus with VMware, and to extend that into the cloud. So it doesn't have that huge impact. And we're also finding that when customers get to the cloud on AWS, they're able to leverage the 200 plus services, as Mike referred earlier. Being able to reduce that infrastructure stack, taking away the networking, the operational requirements around the SAN, storage, servers, hypervisor, releasing yourself from those DC contracts, data center contracts, and being able to then focus on the application stack and above. This is what really helps a business to accelerate, to become more competitive, and to innovate. And being on 17 regions globally, customers can go global in minutes, really, because the VMware Cloud platform is identical across 17 regions in the AWS infrastructure.
I love the underpinning message for me from that was the consistency, right? You know, whether it's on premises in the third-party data center, whether it's in the public cloud of Amazon Web Services, AWS, that consistency of infrastructure, environment, platform, and public cloud environment, as you said, around 17 different regions. I actually had a quote that came out the other day at a briefing I was doing where someone referred to their experience with VMware on-premises and VMware Cloud. And what they said was that it effectively gave them a shift from treating public cloud as infrastructure service as treating public cloud as platform as a service, because they use the same platform environment. They were using sort of, you know, platform as a service internally to instantiate environments, and they were now able to do that in what was a public cloud, which I think was a huge win for them. And as you said, they can now tap into 2+ decades of experience, both from your organization as well as their own skills. I wonder if we could jump to the next key point I wanted to talk about, which is really focused around the technology challenge, the technology problem. And we've touched on a few of those things here, but I wonder if we can delve into that. And particularly, you know, one of the things I wanted to highlight was capabilities around here. You know, when we talk about HPE's Pointnext hybrid cloud practice and expertise you have there in the cloud transformation space. Harris, in this context, I think it's probably appropriate to bring you back in here. You know, let me put it to you this way, how is HPE Pointnext hybrid cloud practice helping organizations deliver value faster in this space and from a technology aspect?
Yeah, thanks, Des. Well, you know, our practice, you know, has, you know, been, you know, operating for 10+ years. And, you know, what we've learned from doing this is that, you know, all customers are at varying stages of cloud adoption, and that's always a moving target. So, you know, we have some customers that are still at the very beginning of their journey, and they're really just formulating their strategy, and we can certainly help with that. We have a lot of clients where that's where we got started. But we have other clients who have, you know, finalized their strategy, and they're now knee deep into figuring out the details of workload migration. And so, you know, our practice is designed to be flexible, and customers can start working with us at any stage. You know, maybe they just need help with a couple parts that they find particularly challenging, or maybe they want to work with us from, you know, end to end, you know, from start to finish. And certainly that was the case for the healthcare customer that I mentioned. But, you know, recognizing that, you know, all customers are different is key, but providing them with a standardized process and a series of success patterns is really important. Okay, so I think that's one differentiator. The other piece, which I mentioned earlier, is that, you know, we don't just focus on the technology, but we also think very deeply about the organization and the business processes. And, you know, that goes back to Mike's comment that, you know, migrating to the cloud is not just about picking up a workload and putting it somewhere else. That's really undermining the value of what we're trying to do. And so HPE always tries to get an organization to think about the transformation holistically, because the more you transform, the more you can unlock the true value of that underlying platform. You know, whether that be VMware, AWS, et cetera. And, you know, I mentioned this before, you know, many customers think that, okay, we migrate the workload, we get it up and running, now we're done, right? That's the end of the story. The truth of the matter is that's, you know, to me, a necessary prerequisite for the real good stuff to begin. And that is where we come in from a managed services perspective. So we have, you know, designed a number of managed services offerings for customers. So we can either assist them in the operation of their new cloud platform, or if they wish, manage it for them end to end. And so, you know, as a committed AWS and VMware partner, you know, we have the capability to support and manage customers' cloud environment, which can include their on-prem VMware environment, their VMware Cloud environment running on AWS, and making those two environments work seamlessly together. And then focusing on some of the areas that I feel are unique challenges to public cloud management. And two of the key ones are, tracking and managing the costs of that platform and making sure that they stay within budget and within the defined parameters, right? That comes down to good governance and good monitoring. And also, in many cases, ensuring regulatory compliance, because whatever that workload is, it is critical to the organization. It may have a regulator who's looking at it. It may be managing critical data. And so making sure that, we deploy it on day one, it's compliant. We want to make sure it's compliant a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now.
Actually, Harris, let me just stay for 1 second. We've got a few questions coming around that. I'm going to paraphrase. There's about 7 or 8 different questions just scrolling up through the chat there. I'm going to paraphrase them into 2 key points. One of them, let me first just start with you, Harris, just on some of the things you talked there. One of the groupings of questions just around, should we not do a lift and shift if there's a particular business case for that? Should we refactor, re-engineer? I've personally been in environments where very large organizations with 30 or 40 business units have actually done a P2V, then a physical to virtual to cloud lift and shift because it suited them. Because as David alluded to before, sometimes you either need to commercially or technically get out of a data center environment. With your experience, Harris, just touching on what you're there, just a couple of questions come up in the chat. Should that never be done? Is it an option to consider for various reasons? What are some of the reasons that a lift and shift might be done as an interim stage versus a long-term strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So let me break that down into a couple of points. So first of all, Des, you made an excellent point, which is there are very legitimate reasons why an organization may start with a lift and shift. The data center lease expiration, example is one that I faced personally. We just recently did that with a client who said, we've got a date, we've got to get out of there, right? We've had other customers that have perhaps an end of life a hardware issue that they're trying to mitigate. They've had some unreliability in their environment and they want to, increase the uptime. And so I'm not saying to a customer, don't do lift and shift. Lift and shift is bad. I think it has its place. And there are some workloads that are very hard to transform, or perhaps the economics don't justify it, right? So it's not an all or nothing answer. But the concern that I have is that sometimes companies will do a lift and shift, and then they'll say, okay, we spent some money, we got into the cloud, now the problem is solved, with the expectation that that is then going to unlock all of these benefits because they think that they're done, but the reality is that they've just done step 1. So I think as long as the lift and shift is viewed in the broader context of transformation, it's fine. And I also think it's important that customers at least consider their path into the cloud. Lift and shift is one of many paths. And I think it's worth considering, but they should also consider the others. And there, in my opinion, even for a single organization, a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always make sense. I am more inclined to take a workload-based approach as opposed to an enterprise-wide approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a great point. I'm going to keep the other groupings of the questions for David after I get him to respond to this technology challenge, because they will probably make sense in the context of what I'm sure he's going to share. David, I wonder if I could bring you in here to share your thoughts around this space with regard to the technology challenge that people are facing, in particular around the key benefits of leveraging experts to drive successful cloud outcomes for organizations where cloud expertise wouldn't be core business for them. What are you seeing out there?
I think it's fair to say that not all customers are experts in VMware, VMC, or the cloud, but companies or partners like HPE can bring the consultancy, the migration, the modernization capability to a customer's requirements, and we see partners playing a huge role in that area in helping customers transform. But when we talk about migrate now or modernize later, again, I go back to that statement I made earlier. Customers now have choice. So it's really about running in parallel and not being an either or. We're seeing customers choose an and. A cloud journey can take 2 to 3 years. And during that cloud journey, you can experience double bubble costs. So you'll still have your on-premise, you'll have your cloud provider costs, you'll have consultancy, training, migration costs. If you can remove some of those costs, like shutting down a data center or partially closing it so that you're reducing those costs, you can put that extra budget into the project. We're also seeing that, during the periods of long cloud journeys, you might lose stakeholders. There might be mergers and acquisitions. There might be changes at government. The competition landscape will change, or global impacts such as COVID, which makes, brings risks and problems to projects that run for that period. If you've got all of your workloads in the cloud and you can modernize and iterate over time, and as to Harris's point, the fact that not all applications will be modernized because they're legacy applications or may not be economical to do so, it gives you a choice. So you can be an either or you can do an and we're finding customers are doing the and. So they're running workloads in VMC on AWS, and they're also modernizing at the same time those applications or databases that make sense. And I guess, around the technology component, this is really important where partners help mitigate those risks. They can be the ongoing managed services provider and really help provide successful outcomes. So it's really important that customers look at their business requirements and now then look at the angles or the avenues that they can move those workloads to cloud and then become more innovative as time moves forward.
Perfect. And David, I was going to stay with you for the second. There are 3 questions that have come in for our attendees, and thank you everyone for putting forward. And I apologize for paraphrasing them, but just in the interest of time. One of the things that followed a couple of the questions we just put to Harris a moment ago, David, I wonder if I could get you to respond, is that there's been 3 or 4 questions around the challenge of leveraging existing skills to get outcomes in this process of transitioning to cloud. And particularly where, if it's not necessarily a lift and a shift, but to get an environment running with VMC or VMware Cloud, as you call it, and into AWS, for some of those things that are either, as you said earlier, responding to the likes of a global pandemic or a business initiative or some commercial need, are you seeing that that's a natural progression? I think that I'll paraphrase the questions. Is it a normal step to go through, an initial phase of moving what we can with our own skills to the cloud, in parallel to bringing in partners like HPE Pointnext and co to kind of get to a better state? But commercially, does it make sense to make that first move to use your own skills, because you can in the short term instantiate environment, and essentially, if you're deploying a VM on premises or in a data center, you could just as easily then deploy it out to VMware Cloud and leverage all of those things you spoke to. That I'm sure must be a fairly logical thing people are doing just to leverage your initial skills in the short term, whilst they look to the long-term opportunities.
I guess to put it in a nutshell, so VMware Cloud and AWS is just like another landing zone you would do on premise. So if you wanted to move workloads through vMotion within your own data center or from a data center to another data center, you do that through vMotion. It's the same motion to move to VMware Cloud and AWS. So the skill is the same. You're doing it through vCenter. You're raising trouble tickets through vCenter. VMware supports VMware Cloud and AWS. It's the only hybrid cloud that VMware support. So the support model is the same as well, and the same mechanisms. So none of that changes. So you're actually leveraging your own skill sets you have existing now, or your partner skill sets to move workloads, but you're getting the benefits of cloud. I guess one of the biggest iterations that's really come about hybrid cloud and VMware Cloud and AWS is that when you create that environment on VMware Cloud, we link your AWS account to VMware, the VMC environment. So if you don't have one, you create one, and that automatically gives you, and we put in there a 25 gigabit elastic network interface. So effectively what that means is that your workloads are running and looking exactly the same in a different data center on AWS hardware, and being managed by VMware. So all the patching, all the upgrades, all the latest versions are running for your VMware Cloud. And you then have a 25 gigabit elastic network interface, which gives you access into the 200 plus AWS services. So over time, your skills and your staff, or your staff skills, can be upgraded. They can start to look at cloud networking, cloud security, cloud storage. And that 25 gigabit elastic network interface means no latency and no data egress charges, because you're within the same data center. So it's really a great stepping stone to upgrade and skill your staff into cloud without the management of the actual stack. So all of the infrastructure below is being managed and supported by VMware. And again, as I said, supported by VMware through the same mechanisms you would raise support tickets on premise. So this is a fantastic step to get your staff aligned to cloud architectures, cloud blueprints, start to experiment, start to use DevOps, skills and start to upgrade their capabilities. And it really is a big discussion that a lot of businesses have, and a bit of trepidation around moving to the cloud, is that how do they cross that chasm of going from on-premise infrastructure, day two operations, into a cloud environment? And this is a fantastic way to do that.
Indeed. We've had about 2 or 3 questions, which I'm going to answer just briefly that have come through the hashtag on Twitter as well, and that relate to what we've just been talking to before I come back to you, Denise. And that is that people asking about how to get in touch and reach out. We'll provide information with the show description in some of the follow-up posts. We'll also provide information in the follow-up with folk who registered. But to those who are posting on the hashtag on Twitter with regard to how to have this conversation, how to reach out and get in contact, we'll make sure that's easy to do, and we'll bring the team to the conversation online as well. And the key would be to do that sooner than later. Don't wait, don't delay, do that now. Denise, I'm really keen to get your insights here around the technology problem when we think about the broad range of topics that organizations are having to face here, from on-premises and the shift to transition to VMware Cloud in AWS. I wonder if you could share your thoughts around what senior business and technology decision makers should be considering in regard to the technology challenges, and particularly partnering with experts with skills to deliver good outcomes.
Yeah, amazing question. Thank you. I love this. Well, firstly, what I really admire is companies that are fanatical about customer experience and success. And I think for me, customer obsession is the foundation of being a great partner. It's about deeply understanding the customer, their pain points, why cloud, and the value that they want to deliver to their customers. So for me, customers' obsession is about understanding how a customer measures success, included their stated objectives and their unarticulated needs. And we've seen in the last 12 months, organizations worldwide are in constant state of digital evolution as customers continue their transformation journey in this digital economy. They are slowly and surely decreasing their reliance on on-premise software. You've heard this throughout the conversation today, and increasing the use of cloud services. And partners play a significant and critical role in all stages of the customer lifecycle. Respectfully today, and I mean that respectfully, very few corporations have the diversity of skills required to support the strategy. You've heard that from Michael and from Harris, the planning readiness, the adoption, the governance and management. And how do you even think and take control of your entire security estate? So for me, what customers really should be looking for and demanding for is really partnering with partners that've got deep knowledge and expertise. So you would want to look at, does the partner have the right relevant vendor certifications, in this case with VMware and with AWS. And another thing that I would suggest and encourage is, does a partner really understand the industry that I'm in and the business challenges that I'm facing, and are they empathetic towards that? And I think for me, the real trick here is to take your time and do some due diligence. And then you should have the right experienced professionals on your side that will ensure a really smooth transition. So that would be my recommendation.
Fantastic. No, I appreciate it. I'd like to shift our focus now to the operations problem. It's all well and good to design a solution from a business point of view, transition some of the technology aspects which we've spoken to, but then we get to the key challenge of keeping it running, the operational element. Now, it's a no-brainer that HPE can help address a range of those challenges, and not all of them, when we would encounter as an organization in cloud transformations, by providing services for organizing and planning and implementing those solutions. But I wonder, David, if I could bring you back in here for a moment. When we think about the operational challenge, the operational problem, if you like, from an operational point of view, I imagine the challenge of seamless integration of both on-premises and in cloud with common infrastructure and common environments, VMware Cloud and AWS offers a lot of things you spoke about in many ways is sort of what I would refer to as a game changer for some of the organizations taking this approach. I wonder if you could touch on, you've spoken about some of those, but I wonder if you could just touch on some of the operational aspects of the key reasons why this is the case, that this solution is effectively a no-brainer game changer.
Yeah, thanks, Des. So IDC did a report late last year with 17 customers globally, and several of those customers were actually in our region in APJ. So they got a good synopsis. It was across, telecommunication, retail, financial services, public sector, etc. And some of the outputs were things like 43% lower cost of operations, 37% increase in application performance because of the resiliency of the hardware that runs on being AWS Nitro servers or bare metal servers, and the fact that VMware provided the latest versions. And in many cases, the infrastructure itself is probably higher spec and better performing than most customers on-premise, given that many customers take a version of N-1 when they're moving through the VMware stack. And because VMware run their latest versions, you've got the latest features, the latest functionality. There was 76% less in unplanned downtime, a 40% increase in efficiency gain from IT management staff. So really you start to see customers getting benefits of having infrastructure on a managed platform. And again, partners play a big role in that as well. Partners like HPE that can then start to take on those operational challenges that were on premise to now start managing those for customers. I guess the other area that really gives operational excellence to businesses is that they can be now seen to be able to transform the business. So to be able to modernize and integrate into AWS services, really becoming, I guess, teams or experts in cloud transformation, and really having that opportunity to take those operational challenges away from the business and delivering cost savings, innovation, competitive edge, and really driving that customer kind of output that all organizations are looking for their operational teams to deliver. And add to that the fact that then they can start to move into things like machine learning or data analytics or serverless services through the AWS services. That then helps the business to start to put more opportunity into the operational teams to become that innovation engine for the business. And this is where we're seeing a lot of output from customers who have started to adopt VMware Cloud and who have done that hybrid approach. And if they don't all move the workloads from all on-premise into the cloud, they're moving their key applications or databases. And that's the area that operations teams are starting to really invigorate and really drive through the business.
Fantastic. Denise, I wonder if I can come back to you, because this follows on from what Dave was just talking about there and some of the key points you mentioned before in the technology aspects. From an operational point of view, I wonder if you could share your insights and some of the experience you've seen of late around what some of the common operational challenges are being seen out there, and particularly some of the pitfalls that organizations face in implementing cloud transformations. I wonder if you could offer your thoughts around how businesses could potentially avoid some of those, and in particularly by leveraging VMware's cloud on AWS.
Yeah, I think from what my observations are, some of the challenges for customers adopting public clouds is really the inability to leverage the existing skill sets. I think we've heard it throughout the conversation, and really deciding where to run the applications and the need for re-architecting applications, the difference in operational models, established governance, the availability and the security and the control policies. I think for me, a solution or a step forward could be the VMware Cloud on AWS does deliver that unified infrastructure that bridges the gap between the public and the private clouds. And I think for me, when you think about that, you've got the workload portability and hybrid capability, so you get the best of both worlds, and you get direct access to the power of native AWS services that David actually has suggested. So for me, I would spend some time really looking at the VMC on AWS solution to mitigate some of those pitfalls.
Fantastic. That's some great advice there. Harris, there's no secret that you literally have your finger on the pulse of what some of the key success factors are to achieving operational success in cloud transformations with VMC or VMware Cloud on AWS. I wonder if you could share from an operational point of view what some of the key drivers of success are and what you're doing there at HPE Pointnext with cloud implementations.
Absolutely, Des. So, I think the biggest, concern and issue that I see is organizations that focus purely on just migrating existing workloads in a like-for-like fashion, or just replicating an old legacy process, moving it from on-prem to cloud, right? I think those are the customers that I have the greatest concerns over. I think that could be a step in the journey, as I mentioned, but that shouldn't be the whole journey, And I think, the power and the benefit of choosing VMware Cloud on AWS is that they've done a fantastic job from an engineering perspective of ensuring technical compatibility for the majority of their workloads to run on AWS, right? That's a huge technical obstacle for a lot of customers that they've helped to solve. And I think moreover, once you're running your VMware environment on AWS, as David mentioned, AWS is maintaining that platform and keeping it current, right? So the benefit of that is it allows you, the customer, to focus on the things that you're best able to deal with, right? But that means that you have to then ask the hard questions around your stakeholders to really scrutinize and look at workloads and the underlying business processes and say, these made sense 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Do they make sense now, right? And customers that embrace that mindset of transformation will have the greatest amount of success. Let me give you a few really specific examples of very common things I see all over the place, right? When you build something on-prem and you own the hardware, right, you have to provision for the peak, right? You have to think about what's the maximum load we could get on this workload, and we'll build for that. And so you have infrastructure running that most of the time often sits idle until you hit that peak period, right? In the cloud, you want to take the opposite design approach. You want to build the minimum capacity that you need and then have the ability to quickly scale up and down based on demand, right? So just replicating that gigantic set of virtual machines in the cloud doesn't really make sense from a business or a cost perspective, right? So that's one example. Another one that I see is, when you're running on-prem, there's no real harm in running the workloads 24/7 by 365 because you already have the hardware. So, obviously prod you typically run 24/7, but what about dev and test? Just because dev and test workloads run 24/7 on-prem doesn't mean they should in the public cloud. In fact, the opposite is true, that maybe it makes sense for those workloads to automatically start just before the business day and then automatically shut down, once the business day ends, for example. So those are some, I think really low-hanging fruit and key questions to ask. And, the analogy I'll leave you with is moving to the cloud is very much like moving house, right? The more work you do up front for the move, the easier and more pleasant experience it is when you actually conduct that move. So while it may not be desirable to go and clean out that shed, if you can eliminate 2/3 of the junk in there, right, it's going to make your experience much better. And in the IT world, it's thinking about your legacy apps, legacy data. All of these things have gravity, right? And they just weigh you down. So any transformation that you can do before you adopt the cloud will pay dividends down the road.
Fantastic key point. The two things that really jumped out at me there, and thank you, Harris, was that cloud is in many ways a consumption model, so you're paying as you use it, and also I think a lot of people forget that they can essentially do what we're calling cloud bursting, which is if you've got an on-premises environment that's running heavy, you can burst some of that workload to the cloud for a period of time, even if it's a week or so, and move some of the workload there and then bring it back. And I'm thinking like even now. In Asia Pacific and Australia, end of financial year reporting, rather than waiting for 2 days for those financial analyses to be done, burst it out the cloud and run 4 times the capacity and get it in a quarter of a time and get that business benefit from it immediately. Well, Denise, David, Harris, Michael, thank you so much for an amazing conversation there. Really appreciate the amazing insights from both, from business, technology, and operational points of view. In our last 10 or so minutes, folks, we're going to shift now to a Q&A component where we're going to be putting your various questions. We've had a flood of them, so I'm going to paraphrase them to get through as many as we possibly can in this question and answer section. And thank you for everyone sticking with us through this amazing hour. Really great conversation. I wonder if we can now put a few questions to you. I'm going to paraphrase them. Harris, Denise, David, Mike, let's see. I'm going to start with Denise. A number of things that were raised through a couple of the points that you shared. People have been very, very positive about some of the insights there. What they're interested in getting is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, essentially what I would describe as best practice. So Denise, I wonder if I can start with you in this Q&A component. If you could maybe paraphrase, what do you see as best practice? And particularly the questions that have been coming in are focused around things like how organizations should start thinking about what, the demarcation or grouping for responsibility and accountability and so forth. And I think you mentioned a term we were speaking earlier around sort of mapping out a RACI chart, that responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, and what that looks like, and in many ways, who's on point for various things, who owns it, and how they should essentially get their house in order. I wonder if you could kind of give us some insights into the way to approach that.
Look, migrations from an on-premise to the cloud really requires careful preparation on the technical end as well as the business end. And fundamentally, what you want to make sure is that you've got a model in place that is sustainable. So I would introduce a racing model. That is what I would consider as best practice, and we can certainly share that post the call if you like. But how do you think on who's on point for cloud adoption, who's on point for cloud strategy, who's on point for the cloud operations, the automation and the platform? And I think for me, having that level of clarity within the business is a really good stepping stone. And by far, I've seen when I've seen that used and used effectively, I would definitely consider that as best practice. So a racing model really early in the transition would be fundamental.
Fantastic. I'm going to quickly answer two other questions that come up around skills and certification training as well that have come through. I'm going to paraphrase them and thank you everyone. There's about 9 of you that asked this question in various forms. One of the things that I recommend people do is start with your HR departments. You know, it sounds like a bit of a weird thing to do for a technology or a cloud related thing, but bring your HR department and human resource department and look at what skills you've got internally, who's got their skills, where they are, what availability they have, what training certification they've got, and what partners like HP and VMware and AWS can potentially do to help you backfill some of those skills or rerun training and certification. Great questions, but yeah, I think the answer is just reach out and make sure that your HR department is part of any of these initiatives to address some of those things. Don't just assume that people know what they're doing. Make sure they've got the right skills and experience and certification and training, and look to partners like HPE and VMware and AWS and co to help you in that space. Harris, I'm going to get you to just give us a quick 30-second answer on this one because it's come up with a lot of people here through the hour. The question essentially is, you know, what should VMware customers consider from a licensing perspective when they move to AWS? Harris, I wonder if you can give us a very brief response to that.
Absolutely. Well, you know, licensing is a complex topic, and you know, I would encourage anyone listening to this webcast who wants to talk about their specific situation to use the contact information that you promised, Des, to reach out to HPE or VMware or AWS or all the above, and make sure that we're, you know, aligning with your specific requirements. But what I would say to answer that generically is there's 2 components to consider, right? One is your, you know, VMware licensing, and most of the customers that I work with already have a relationship with VMware and already have an ELA, right? And so one of the really powerful things about VMware Cloud on AWS is you can bring your licensing with you, right? You don't have to, you know, fundamentally change that. If you've got an existing relationship with VMware and you feel that that's going to be suitable for you as you move to the cloud, you can bring that along, and that's really, really powerful, right? And then the second piece is that, you know, when you're moving from on-prem to public cloud, you're trading, as I mentioned, you know, a fixed CapEx cost with a, you know, a variable OpEx cost, which is based upon usage. And that's where you really have the opportunity for cost savings by changing your operating model to align with cloud economics. And I mentioned a few of those things: not building for the peak, not running things 24/7, leveraging automation, et cetera, et cetera. That's your opportunity to dramatically save where possible. But then, as you mentioned, to burst up when you need it, so you don't have to say sorry to your customers when you get into that peak season or where you get unexpected demand. So that really, you know, comes down to a pay-as-you-use model. And so if you can balance those 2 components of the VMware licensing and the consumption on AWS, that's where customers really unlock the value of that partnership.
Fantastic. We're coming up to the hour, so in the interest of time, I'm going to just paraphrase a group of them. Mike, I'm going to come next to you, and then David, I'll wrap up with you. Mike, you mentioned a number of use cases earlier that are causing clients to consider VMware Cloud on AWS. There are a range of questions around that. I'm going to paraphrase them and see if I can get you to give us a 60-second bullet point summary of some of the classic use cases you're seeing that are driving adoption of VMware on AWS.
Sure. Classic use cases, assuming that you're an enterprise, assuming you've made a significant investment in VMware, including your staff as well, training and tools. If any of these topics come up, you should consider it. You should seriously consider, you know, VMC as a solution. One is the data center closure. We talked about that. 2, you're underperforming in the area of HA and DR. So, you know, with VMC going to one region, you can stretch a cluster over 2 availability zones and easily add a 9, like that. Can't do that on premise. Disaster recovery, you can think about disaster recovery as a service going across 2 regions, right? With Site Recovery Manager. 3, we talked about the financial model, going from CapEx to OpEx. Right? You can rent the service by the hour, or if you want to make an investment, you can buy 1-year subscriptions or 3-year subscriptions and save significantly. So there's a financial aspect if you're getting pinched there. And let's see, are there any more? Managed service. Right? So everyone loves to patch systems and upgrade and do stuff like that, right? Yeah, you're really good at it, right? Let the experts do that and allow your staff to focus higher on the stack. And then lastly, as we stated, this is a bridge to continue innovation. A lot of blockers we see in the cloud journey are tied to what we call data gravity. Right? I can't move this application to the cloud. Boy, I really would like to have it running up on AWS. When you move the platform, all your applications are going to be coterminous, right, with services. So you can then drive innovation. Those are the use cases we've been seeing.
Thanks, Mike. David, we're going to wrap up with you. We're just coming up on the hour, but there's a whole range of questions around, I guess, just to paraphrase some of the key approaches that have made previous VMware Cloud transitions successful. I wonder if you could wrap us up with a 60-second summary of kind of a couple of bullet points around approach to successful outcomes with the VMware Cloud transitions to AWS.
Sure, and I'll be quick. So having been in market now for 4 years, we've got a good view of what helps make customers successful. And there's two things. So what you want to do probably already been done. And there's many blueprints, architectural blueprints on both the VMware website and AWS website, with integrations into storage providers like Veeam or Commvault, integrations around Oracle, Microsoft platform, etc. So what you want to do is probably already been done, and you can get a really accelerated quick start. The other one is that we offer a no-cost POC. So we'll provide the platform, and a partner like HPE can facilitate a 2 or 4 week proof of concept. And they're not like cloud native proof of concepts, in that most customers know what VMware looks and feels like. They've been using it for years. So really, it's just the proof points around layer 2 stretch. Does it look the same in vCenter? Can I, wrap my security protocols around my workloads on-prem and when I move them into the cloud? And as Mike mentioned, DR is a common one. And in fact, I'll give you an example where a customer moved 350 VMs into VMware Cloud and AWS. This is PHI in the US, one of our early adopters. And when they started to run it, they found it was actually more efficient, it ran better, they had greater accessibility, they could do more with it. They decided to move their DR back on premise and put their production into VMware Cloud and AWS because it proved itself out. And so many customers go from POC and pilot into production. And again, that financial model of on demand, so spin it up, spin it down, or your existing ELA kind of structure of 1 year or 3 year RI subscription options. And again, working directly with AWS or VMware or through a partner like HPE is the best way to start to get started.
Indeed, and I love your last minute points. Reach out early, start that conversation, avoid all those pitfalls. Harris, Mike, Denise, David, thank you so much for spending an hour with us and your amazing insights on the business, technology, and operational aspects. And thank you for getting through as many of the questions we could before we hit the hour. Folks, we have hit the top of the hour in the interest of respecting your time. I'm sure we've all got busy days. A huge thank you for everyone that attended. We have an enormous turnout today. We will have this available for replay within the next 48 hours, and we'll share that out in email as well. We would love you to share this with your associates and members of your team, anyone in your network. Huge thank you to our sponsors, HPE, VMware, and AWS. We would love you to continue the conversation online. Be sure to follow the hashtag HPE Evolve. Make sure you're following each of our 3 partners here today on various platforms on Twitter and LinkedIn. And reach out to the crew that have been on the call on the event today and pose your curly questions to them. It's been a privilege to spend an hour with all of you here, folks, and attendees and presenters. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next event at HPE Evolve Event 2. We'll have details coming out to you in email. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good morning, evening, afternoon, night, wherever you might have tuned into. And we'll look forward to you in the next event. My name is Des Blanchfield. Stay safe. We'll see you again soon.